All right, today we're tackling something that can look incredibly promising, but can also be super confusing: the indexed universal life insurance illustration. We're going to deconstruct it piece by piece so you can see what's real and what's just a sales pitch.
So if you've ever seen one of these, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's this thick packet of paper, right? And it's just filled with charts and tables, and of course, these massive numbers that promise you're gonna be a multimillionaire. I mean, let's be honest, it's designed to make your jaw drop. But the big question is, what is this thing really telling you? How much of this is a projection, a what if, and how much is an actual contractual promise? That's what we're here to do. Let's peel back the curtain and find out. Okay, here's our game plan. We're going to break it down into 6 simple parts. First, we'll figure out what this document even is and what it isn't. Then we'll look at the 3 main promises they put right up front. After that, we'll get into how your money supposedly grows. And then, and this is super important, we'll look at the 2 critical scenarios. Finally, we'll talk about how you'd get your money out and the key questions you absolutely need to ask. All right, first things first. Let's get the most fundamental things straight. Even though it looks all official with its charts and logos, this document is a proposal. It is not a contract that guarantees future results. In fact, if you look closely, the document itself tells you this. It'll say something like, "This is an illustration, not intended to predict actual performance." It's all based on assumptions that the company itself admits are not likely to occur, and that, quote, "actual results may be more or less favorable." So, in plain English, this whole thing is a best guess scenario, not a guarantee of what's going to happen. So keeping that in mind, that this is a what if, let's look at what the proposal is actually showing you. Right up front, they're going to hit you with 3 big, really attractive benefits. This is the heart of the sales pitch. It pretty much boils down to these 3 things. You've got the death protection, the classic reason for life insurance. Then you've got the part everyone gets excited about, this potential for a massive pile of cash to build up. And then there's this other thing they call living benefits.
Promise number 1 is pretty straightforward: death protection. So in this real-world example we're looking at, for a 40-year-old woman, the policy is illustrating a $20 million death benefit for her family. A huge number.
Okay, now for the second promise. This is where the numbers get absolutely wild. This illustration projects that by the time she's 100, the policy could have over $86 million in cash value. But, and you knew there was a but, right? Remember that little footnote? This number is based entirely on those non-guaranteed assumptions. This is the dream scenario.
And that third promise is about living benefits. Think of these like escape hatches. They're usually add-ons or riders that let you get a piece of your death benefit while you're still alive, but only if something serious happens, like you get a terminal illness, a chronic condition, or even something like Alzheimer's. So how on earth does a policy project that kind of massive growth? Well, the secret is right in the name: indexed universal life. So let's pop the hood and take a look at the engine that's supposed to make all this happen.
Indexed crediting is actually a pretty clever idea. Your money isn't actually invested in the stock market. Instead, the interest your policy gets is just linked to how a market index, like the S&P 500, performs. So think of it this way: you're not actually buying the stocks. You're buying a coupon, and the value of that coupon depends on what the S&P 500 does. Now, this whole system is controlled by 3 main levers. First, you've got the floor. That's your safety net. If the market totally tanks, you're guaranteed not to lose money. You'll usually get 0%, but that safety comes at a price. In exchange, there's a cap, which is a ceiling on how much you can earn. No matter how high the market goes, the cap is the most you can get. And then there's the participation rate, which decides what slice of the market's gain you actually get credited. It's a classic trade-off. You get rid of the risk of losing money, but you also limit your chance for those huge breakout gains. Let's see how this actually works, using some real data from the illustration. Okay, look at 2008. The S&P 500 got crushed, down almost 38.5%. But the policy? It got a 0. The floor did its job, you lost nothing. Awesome. But look at the next year, 2009. The market roars back, up over 23%. The policyholder only got 11% because they smashed right into that cap. So you can see how you get a much smoother ride, but it's a limited one. All right, lean in for this next part, because we are now at what is, without a doubt, the most important section in this entire document. This is where the dream scenario we've been talking about gets a major reality check.
So every illustration by law has to show you two columns, side by side. On the left, you've got the non-guaranteed values. That's the dream we've been seeing, projecting over $8.5 million by age 65. But then you look to the right. That's the guaranteed column. This assumes the absolute worst-case scenario the contract allows, the highest possible fees and the lowest possible interest. And in that scenario, the cash value at age 65 is zero, a big, fat zero.
And it's not just that the value is zero. It's why it's zero that is so critical. Buried in the fine print is this sentence. I'm going to read it word for word. The policy will lapse in policy year 26 unless a higher premium is paid. Let that sink in for a second. The contract's guaranteed worst-case scenario isn't just that you have slow growth. It's that the policy completely fails and disappears.
Okay, let's just imagine for a second that the dream scenario works out and you do build up all this cash value. How do you actually get to it and use it? Because accessing the money is a huge selling point, but you have to know the rules.
So you can get to your cash through withdrawals or, more often, through policy loans. Now, it's really important to know that when you take money out, it lowers your cash value and it lowers the final death benefit. But here's the real kicker. For those loans to stay tax advantaged, the policy has to stay alive. If it ever lapses with a loan out against it, that loan can suddenly become a massive taxable income event for you.
And speaking of taxes, there's another tripwire you have to be careful of. It's called a modified endowment contract, or MEC for short. Basically, if you try to put too much money into the policy too fast, more than the IRS allows, it gets reclassified. And this is a huge deal, because if your policy becomes an MEC, that tax-free loan benefit, which is one of the main selling points, it's gone. And any money you take out gets taxed way less favorably. Okay. We've taken the whole thing apart, we've seen the best case dream and the worst case nightmare. So to wrap this all up, let's turn this information into power. Here are the questions that this document should make you want to ask. Before you even think about moving forward, take these questions to your advisor. First, what exact interest rate are you assuming to get me these giant numbers? And second, what are the absolute maximum charges and fees you can hit me with? Because those two things, the assumed interest and the max fees, are what create that nightmare scenario. Then, ask them straight up, when would I have to pay more money just to keep this policy from collapsing? And finally, tell them, show me a new illustration, but this time use a much more conservative interest rate, something halfway between the dream and the disaster. And that really leads us to our final thought. After you've looked at all the multi-million-dollar projections, all the charts, all the what-ifs, it's worth taking a step back and just asking yourself, in this entire proposal, what is the one number that is truly 100% contractually guaranteed? Because when you can answer that, you understand the whole document.